Hi everyone, I hope you're doing well today. Today I wanted to talk about erythritol. This was a news item concerning research that came from the Cleveland Clinic. And the Cleveland Clinic does have a good reputation, and that's why I think major news outlets took it seriously. This was a study on thousands of people, apparently data that already existed. This research showed a link between erythritol, blood levels, and what they called cardiac events, specifically heart attacks and strokes, which is very serious. Now, this really wasn't a study per se, or at least not what some would think of as a study. This was more research, and I think they referred to it as that, as research. They recommended against using extra erythritol. Now, they did acknowledge that there is natural erythritol created by the body in some circumstances, but that amount tends to be very low, and they're concerned about adding to that amount. Normally, what's produced by the body is eliminated in the urine. They're concerned about having that little extra bit in the blood. I wanted to talk a little bit about erythritol and artificial sweeteners, because one of the places people get it, right here, in artificial sweeteners, erythritol. Back in the early 2000s, the artificial sweetener aspartame was gaining a bad name for itself because of neurological damage and symptoms. A lot of this was covered in Dr. Russell Blaylock's very popular book, Excitotoxins, The Taste That Kills. That book did cover how aspartame is in the same class of substances as MSG, for example. And Dr. Blaylock described in great detail on how it will excite nerves until they die. Basically open the calcium channels and it'll excite the next nerve down. So every time you drink some of it, it can cause damage like that. And people didn't want that. There was a rise in neurological problems and even brain cancer as aspartame became more popular. But at the same time, there was massive growth of the cellular industry. A lot of times there's more than one cause that can lead to the same place. And so it was hard to sort out exactly how much was due to aspartame and how much was due to cell phones versus other environmental toxins and food additives. I mean, who knows? It was something that consumers decided they didn't want. At the same time, in the health food store crowd, there was a natural herb that had been in use for, I don't know, years, maybe decades. It's from Paraguay. And it's called stevia. And it is just an herb, but its spiciness is actually sweetness. So instead of tasting spicy like hot or flowery, it tastes sweet. The thing with stevia is it's easy to add too much really fast. I mean, just the tiniest smidge. If you were to take a packet like this, and this is actually one that doesn't have erythritol in it, sugar users would rip open 2 or 3 of these for a cup of coffee. Anywhere from 1 to 3, I'd imagine. This thing, you pour the whole thing in your coffee, you're going to regret it because it'll be way too sweet to drink. I mean, this will handle 3 or 4 cups. If you were to put the exact amount for a cup of coffee in here of the herb stevia, it would be like tearing this open and getting a puff of air with a little bit of green in it. I mean, that's how little you need. Also with baking, I mean, you might think, well, that's a great thing. I could make cookies and pies and everything with stevia. Well, yeah, you can, but there are a couple of issues with using it in baking. I've experienced it with trying to sweeten a pie with stevia. Basically, the next day, it has like the sour taste or bitter taste, depending on how you perceive it or how much is in there. So a lot of times, it tastes great at first when it first comes out of the oven, but then the next day, the leftovers don't taste so good. If the thing has time to marinate overnight, it'll be the same as if you put way too much in there. And if you put too much of this in your coffee, the same thing happens. It'll go bitter or sour on you. That's what we used in our coffee. The only problem is the FDA wouldn't approve this for mainstream soft drink manufacturers and mainstream food producers. It wasn't approved as food. It was approved as an herb. You could sell it at health food stores. People who knew about it could use it. There was even a soda that had it in there, but that soda was sold at health food stores. It had certain labeling on it. You have this just waiting to go. The health food store just wanting this in their drinks instead of things like aspartame or sucralose or saccharin. and they wouldn't let us have it. Some people would see undue corporate influence in that, and there probably was a lot of that going on, where people wanted to make their money from aspartame before it was pulled off the market or banned or whatever. Now you're allowed to use stevia, and some companies do put stevia in their soft drinks, and sometimes mixed with other things. Now, another thing that's become popular, this is monk fruit that has erythritol in it. Years ago, I found a little dropper of monk fruit extract that was liquid, and I calculated that 3 little drops in my coffee would give it, the perfect amount of sweetness. So I'd take that around and use it at restaurants and everything. And then they pulled it off the market, or at least it wasn't available anywhere I shopped after that. But yet another product that I really liked yanked from the market for some unknown reason. I don't know if that had erythritol in it, but I doubt it, because you don't need it for something like a liquid extract. One criticism of the Cleveland Clinic's research is that it is a statistical bias. And specifically, I think they're talking about a statistical bias of self-selection. As a person with a degree in sociology, I know about these things. What self-selection says is the type of people you're studying already were predisposed to the outcome. Or let me put this a different way. A kid goes to a good school and graduates and easily gets a good job. And people would say, oh, that's a good school. Look, the kids who graduate from there get good jobs. And yet, to get in that school, you had to be good. You already had to be good, and those kids would have made it no matter where they went to school, because they're smart, they work hard, they study, they can follow directions, they're responsible, all these kinds of things. To get in that school, you had to be like that. So when you get out the other end, of course you're going to do well, no matter which school you go to. And you selected yourself to go to that school for whatever reason. Maybe because of its reputation, which actually came from people like you and not really the school itself. But that is self-selection. And a lot of times people say, well, the people you studied already had this condition. That's why they were using artificial sweeteners. Like maybe people who already had heart problems, because plaque in the arteries is a lot of times worsened by sugar intake. Maybe they're on artificial sweeteners because they're afraid of getting more plaque, or they're working on trying to get rid of the plaque in their arteries. And so they were already predisposed to heart attacks and strokes. And that's a good criticism, except they were looking at blood levels of erythritol. They were saying that the body makes its own erythritol, but this is above and beyond that. And the body can eliminate the small amount it makes in the urine. They're thinking that maybe it can't eliminate this, and this had some kind of influence. So again, they're like, well, if it's in the blood, then that means they're using it, which could be part of self-selection. Yes, it could be, but on the other hand, there are other people who drink artificial sweeteners for no particular reason. They want to lose weight. They don't want cavities in their teeth. Maybe they're just trying to avoid plaque forming in their arteries and they're too young to have it yet. So you look at overall, and there could be an argument made that when you take away the people who don't need it in their blood, that you still have a significant link between erythritol and heart attacks and strokes. So it does need further study, and I know that used to be a joke, or probably still is a joke in the academic field. The way of getting grants and things like this is to do a small study that's just enough to tantalize people into paying for a larger study. And it's a way of getting money. But in this case, I'd agree. This could use further study, especially, with food manufacturers putting it in their products like it's no big deal. It's a filler, basically. It's a filler. You're probably wondering what this little setup is, and it is a test of the stevia products. This is stevia in the raw, and its ingredients are dextrose and stevia leaf extract. I have a little packet of it right here. This is actually something I still use. This is monk fruit sweetener. It is erythritol, monk fruit extract, and that's it. And I have a little packet right there. This I haven't opened yet, so I'll open it right now. The monk fruit I had tried before, but I didn't feel too well after using it, and so I stopped. I just threw it aside. I was going to throw it out, and I'm glad I didn't with the news about erythritol. Alright, this is a store brand. This is Wegmans. The ingredients: organic erythritol, organic stevia extract. Put this little packet here. This is something I drove all the way to the health food store, which was quite a distance, that had bulk foods. This is actually raw stevia. It's a powdered herb. It is native to Paraguay. Stevia actually is pronounced stevia, not stevia. It is a Spanish word from Paraguay. But you need an incredibly small amount to sweeten a cup of coffee. Well, right now I'm going to show you how much of each I need to sweeten coffee. This is pure stevia. These are versions of it with other things mixed in. To make sure I get a consistent cup of coffee, I am using the same type of bag, same ounces of coffee in each bag. I'm going to pour the water to the same line in the cup. I'm going to sweeten each to about where I like my coffee. And if I oversweeten it, I'll let you know. It's very easy to oversweeten things when stevia is involved. What I've done now is I have brought all of these up to the same level of hot water. They're all steeping. And I'm going to explain about the size of the scoops I have here. These are the tiniest scoops I could find. This one looks like it may be the same or a touch smaller from this one, which says a 1/4 teaspoon. This one also says a 1/4 teaspoon. This one doesn't say anything. What I want to show is how erythritol is just a filler. Stevia in the raw, this stuff is strong. I don't know how much is in here, but I do know that each packet lasts me 3 or 4 cups. I'm only interested in how much of this scoop I'm going to use to get it to where I like it. Alright, so I'm just going to put a little touch in here. Stevia in the raw. This does not have erythritol. I don't like the fact that it has anything else in it. It does have dextrose in it. I don't like that. Alright, I'm going to take one of these little teeny tiny spoons and stir it. I suppose I should take these things out first. This is really steeped long enough, and this could be absorbing some of the sweetener. Won't make much of a difference, though. That one's already well on its way to being sweet. Oh my, that's almost too sweet. So this tiny little amount, as you can see, I mean, I don't even have anything small enough to measure how much of a 1/4 teaspoon that is. But this is what's left. I don't know if you can focus on that. It's just a tiny bit, and most of it's still there. That is enough to sweeten a small cup of coffee. Alright, now I'm going to take this out. And this is the monk fruit sweetener. This does have erythritol in it. And I think the erythritol is just a filler. Nope. Could use a little more sweetener, not much though. Yeah, could use a little more, but it's on the verge of where I like it. Okay, I don't know how well that focuses, but that is probably half of this because, you know, it slopes downward. So you can see that's much less left in the 1/4 teaspoon than the stevia left. I had to go down a bit. It's still not a 1/4 teaspoon, but obviously adding the erythritol diluted it. Okay, this is Wegmans Organic Stevia, and also Truvia, another brand I noticed had erythritol in it. I mean, they wanted a lot of money for it compared to these other brands, and I mean, first of all, when something's named Truvia, it's like, the name is stevia. The herb, it's a Spanish word, it's from Paraguay. Why would you rename it unless, I mean, to me, watch out for things that start with true when truth or fiction has nothing to do with your product. It's just food, right? They felt they had to put all the other junk in it and jack up the price. Alright, this is Wegmans Organic. Wegmans is a store. This is a store brand. I don't know who made it for them, but they do have erythritol in it. Yeah, that's about perfect. It is a tiny bit sweeter than the monk fruit, but it's about the same, honestly. It's close to the same. So you can see I used maybe a smidge less of this than the monk fruit. We're going to go for the actual stevia. Stevia is an incredibly sweet herb. Before they process it to get the color out of it and whatever else, stevia is so sweet. It's a spice, basically. Instead of spiciness, its flavor is sweetness. So I'm just going to put a teeny tiny smidge in. I don't know if I can get a little enough. I can see a fiber from the plant in my coffee. Maybe that's why they try to process a lot of this out. Getting there pretty fast. I could drink it just like that. I do like a tiny bit of sweetness in my coffee, so just put a little bit more. It's right on the verge. I mean, if I put a little more in, it could go too sweet. I'm tasting an after effect of extreme sweetness on my tongue. That's too sweet. Let's dump it out. It's almost the whole quarter teaspoon. And that is what they're doing with these extra additives. They're weakening it. Because stevia is just so sweet, they have to put just a tiny smidge in each packet. I mean, even if you made one packet do 3 or 4 cups like this one can, it would still be just a tiny amount. And if people put too much in, it's just overwhelming sweetness. They have to cut it with something, and they chose to cut some of these, a couple of these with erythritol, that one with dextrose. That's the difference between real stevia, the herb from the health food store, and all these prepackaged things that want to put them in nice little packages so they can charge you more. This entire bag ran me $5. They processed the green color out. I'd imagine they processed some of these fibers out so it doesn't look a little grainy on top like that one does, but you don't have to add anything to your stevia. You can drink it just like that. Obviously, this took almost nothing. These two took a similar amount. They both have erythritol. Both of those packets could sweeten 2 or 3 cups of coffee. And then this one, I already know, can sweeten 3 or 4 cups of coffee. Look how much less you use of this than that. And with that, you use almost nothing. So that's the difference between the filler erythritol. Now, is it worth it? If you have any comments or would like to share your experiences with artificial sweeteners or stevia, erythritol, any of these things, I'd love to hear about them. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel so that I can reach more people on YouTube. Thanks for watching.